Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we are venturing deep into the ancient world of 1 Samuel. This isn't just dusty history. It's really a foundational narrative just packed with human drama, political intrigue, and, profound questions about leadership and faith.
Absolutely. We've got everything here. Personal prayers, family dynamics, national conflicts, the rise and fall of leaders. It's all in there.
Right. So our mission today is to guide you, the learner, through this rich text.
Yeah, we want to unearth the core insights, maybe some surprising moments, without getting too bogged down in every single detail.
Exactly. We want you to come away with a real feel for 1 Samuel and why it matters.
Okay, so where should we start, Hannah?
Let's dive right in with Hannah's story, yeah.
Yeah.
The opening chapters, it's such a powerful beginning. You feel her anguish, don't you, over not having children?
Oh, absolutely. And that sorrow fuels this incredibly intense, very personal prayer.
What's striking to me isn't just the emotion, though. It's her, persistence.
Yes. Unwavering perseverance. She makes this clear vow, and that really sets everything in motion, shaping Israel's future.
It really does. Makes you think, doesn't it, about facing big challenges today.
That kind of persistent engagement.
So, her prayers answered, Samuel is born. And true to her word, she dedicates him to the Lord's service under Eli at the tabernacle.
Right. But then there's her second prayer, the one in chapter 2, her thanksgiving.
Ah, yes. That's more than just thank you, isn't it? It's bigger.
Much bigger. It's a bold declaration about God's power, how God can just upend the whole system.
Right, elevating the humble, bringing down the mighty, reversals of fortune.
Exactly. You see that theme again and again, this idea of the underdog rising. Hannah's prayer really captures that.
And it creates such a stark contrast with Eli's own sons, Hophni and Phinehas.
Oof, yeah. The text is blunt about them, their corruption, disrespect.
Total disregard for the Lord, for the sacrifices.
And that contrast is deliberate, I think.
Yeah.
They represent that danger of, complacency in leadership.
Especially spiritual leadership. It's a powerful warning, still relevant.
Definitely. It highlights the need for real integrity.
And then, quietly in the background, you have young Samuel. Just a child, serving faithfully.
It's a small detail, but it says so much. While the powerful are messing up, Samuel's just there, doing the right thing.
True influence isn't always about status, is it?
Not at all. It's often in that quiet faithfulness.
Okay, so moving to chapter 3, Samuel's calling. This is a huge moment.
It really is. And that phrase, the word of the Lord was precious in those days, there was no open vision.
Yeah, it sets the scene, doesn't it? Divine guidance was rare.
Which makes God calling Samuel even more significant. These moments of clarity, they aren't everyday things.
And the message Samuel gets, it's not exactly good news for Eli.
No, it's heavy. A severe judgment against Eli's house because of his sons, and Eli's failure to restrain them.
And the text says, this iniquity will not be purged with sacrifice nor offering forever. That's final.
It really underscores accountability, doesn't it? Eli was passive, and the consequences were irreversible. What happens when leaders don't act?
Yeah. A tough question. Then we get this whole dramatic saga of the Ark of the Covenant, chapters 4 to 6.
Right. Israel loses a battle, and the elders think, hey, let's bring the Ark into the next fight.
Like a lucky charm.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Which totally misses the point. The Ark symbolized God's presence, the covenant. It wasn't magic.
And it backfires. Big time.
Spectacularly. Israel's defeated again, thousands killed, the Ark is captured. Just devastating.
And the news kills Eli. Just like that.
Yeah. And his daughter-in-law names her son Ichabod.
The glory is departed from Israel. Wow! What a name. What a moment of despair.
Ichabod, it captures that profound sense of loss. Like something absolutely essential is gone, a connection severed.
Have you ever felt that? Like a guiding principle just vanished. That's Ichabod.
But the Philistines find out pretty quickly that having the Ark isn't exactly a picnic.
No kidding. Calamities start hitting them. Their god Dagon keeps falling over.
It's broken.
And then there's the plague. The emerods.
Right. It shows that being close to holiness without understanding or reverence can actually be harmful. They tried to treat the Ark like just another trophy.
And it didn't work out so well for them or Dagon.
Not at all. So after 7 months of this, they're desperate to send it back.
They ask their priests and diviners what to do.
Who advise sending a guilt, offering these golden emerods and golden mice, interestingly mirroring the plagues.
And the return method is so strange. Untrained cows, never yoked, just heading straight back to Israelite territory.
Yeah, leaving their calves behind. It really suggests a higher power at work, guiding things in unexpected ways.
But the joy at Beth Shemesh is short-lived. People look inside the ark.
A fatal mistake.
And many die. It's a really stark reminder of its sacredness. Don't mess with the ark.
Exactly. Respect boundaries, respect the sacred unknown. Casual curiosity has consequences here.
So the ark ends up in Kirjath Jearim for, what, 20 years?
20 years, yeah. Which leads us into chapter 7, and Samuel really steps up.
Right. He calls Israel back to God. Put away the foreign gods. Serve the Lord alone. Then you'll be delivered from the Philistines.
He sees the link, doesn't he? External threats, internal faithlessness. He says, fix the inside first.
A timeless idea. And the people listen, this time.
They gather at Mizpah, fasting, confessing.
Pouring out water. Symbolic repentance.
And when the Philistines attack then, God intervenes. That thunder
Leads to a huge Israelite victory.
It shows the power of that collective repentance, that unified focus.
And Samuel sets up the stone, Ibn Ezra.
Hitherto hath the Lord helped us.
Love that. Acknowledging past help as fuel for the future. It leads to peace for a while, with Samuel judging.
Ibn Ezra. It's about remembering those moments of help, building resilience.
Okay, chapter 8. Things take a turn. The people demand a king.
Like all the nations.
Yeah, and Samuel's not pleased at all.
You can understand why. He sees it as rejecting their unique identity, just wanting to conform. It raises that question. How do you balance fitting in with holding on to your core values?
And the Lord tells Samuel, look, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me.
Right. But he tells Samuel to warn them. Spell out exactly what having a king will mean.
And it's a grim picture. Conscription, taxes, forced labor, losing freedoms.
Samuel lays it all out. The potential downsides of centralized human power. It's a cautionary tale.
But the people just won't listen. They dig in their heels. No, we want a king.
It's fascinating. Despite the clear warnings, they insist.
And God says to Samuel basically, okay, give them what they want.
Hearken unto their voice and make them a king. It's a powerful moment about free will, even when it goes against, perhaps, the ideal plan.
That tension between divine guidance and human choice.
Exactly. God lets them choose, but makes sure they know the potential cost.
So this leads us to Saul, chapters 9 and 10.
Right. He's introduced as this impressive guy, physically striking.
But his initial problem is pretty mundane, finding his father's lost donkeys.
It's a humble start. Shows how destiny can find you in ordinary moments. The search leads him right to Samuel and to his calling.
Because God had already told Samuel, this is the guy.
Yep. Samuel welcomes him, reassures him about the donkeys they're found, by the way, and then privately anoints him with oil.
That private anointing is key, isn't it? It's a divine appointment first, not a public vote.
Establishes the source of his authority, and Samuel gives him signs to confirm it all.
Encounters on the road, prophesying. The text says God gave him another heart, a real transformation.
It suggests an initial spiritual capacity, definitely. These signs confirm it for Saul and validate him publicly later.
But that new heart, it raises questions about whether that change lasts, especially under pressure.
We'll certainly see that play out.
So the public selection happens later at Mizpah by lot, and Saul is hiding.
Hiding among the baggage. Yeah, maybe nerves, maybe understanding the weight of it all.
Could be. But he's brought out, presented, and Samuel says, see him whom the Lord hath chosen, there's none like him.
And the people shout, God save the king. It's the formal start of the monarchy.
But interestingly, it's not unanimous.
No, the text mentions these children of Belial, troublemakers, who were skeptical, didn't bring gifts. Hints a division right from the start.
Foreshadowing, perhaps.
Definitely hints at the challenges ahead for Saul. Universal acceptance is rare.
Okay, chapters 11 and 12. Saul gets his first big test and a chance to prove himself.
The siege of Jabesh Gilead. Nahash the Ammonite.
And his incredibly cruel demand gouge out everyone's right eye.
It wasn't just military. It was meant to humiliate, to cripple them symbolically. A major crisis for the brand new king.
And Saul's response is impressive. The Spirit of God comes on him. He rallies the tribes with that dramatic oxen message.
Right, hewing the oxen. A powerful, almost visceral call to arms.
And they win. A swift, decisive victory against the Ammonites.
This victory was huge for Saul. It cemented his leadership, quieted the doubters, showed he could actually deliver.
Some people then want to punish the skeptics, the ones who doubted him earlier.
But Saul shows mercy, which is wise. Doesn't start his reign with internal score settling.
So they all go to Gilgal, renew the kingdom, formally confirm Saul as king, sacrifices, rejoicing. Seems like a high point.
A moment of real unity, yeah. Collective optimism solidifying the new regime.
But then, chapter 12, Samuel gives his farewell address.
Which is so important. He defends his own time as judge, reminds them of God's faithfulness throughout their history.
And delivers another warning. Obedience is key for them and for their new king.
He's making it clear. The king isn't the ultimate authority. God is. Their security still depends on following God's ways, king or no king.
And to drive the point home, he calls for that thunder and rain during the wheat harvest.
A miraculous sign. Out of season, unsettling. It really underscores their sin in demanding a king in the first place.
They're terrified, understandably. They ask Samuel to pray for them.
And he reassures them. He says, look, I'll keep praying for you. I'll keep teaching you the right way.
It's a poignant transition, isn't it? Monarchy begins, but Samuel's role as spiritual guide continues.
Absolutely. The political structure changed, but that fundamental relationship with God, guided by the prophet, remains crucial.
Okay, but this initial success, it doesn't last, does it? Chapters 13 to 15 detail Saul's big mistakes, his disobedience.
Right. It starts seemingly small, with that impatience at Gilgal. He offers the burnt offering himself instead of waiting for Samuel.
Why was that such a big deal?
It showed a lack of trust in God's timing, prioritizing his own anxiety over direct command. It was about obedience, and he failed the test, acting out of fear, not faith.
And Samuel's reaction is severe. He tells Saul straight up, you acted foolishly, you haven't kept the command.
And then comes the bombshell. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart. Saul's kingdom won't endure.
Wow, that's the pivot point, the beginning of the end for Saul's divine mandate.
Exactly, and it foreshadows David. It shows that partial obedience, or obedience based on convenience, just isn't enough.
The narrative then shows Israel getting weaker under Philistine pressure. No blacksmiths. They had to go to the Philistines to sharpen tools.
Yeah, it paints a picture of real vulnerability. A lack of weapons, dependence on the enemy. It shows the tangible costs of losing God's favor.
Then there's Jonathan's brave but unauthorized attack.
Right. Courageous, but it leads to Saul making that rash oath. Nobody eats until evening.
Which completely backfires. It hinders the army, makes them weaker.
It shows Saul's poor strategic thinking, his impulsiveness. He's more concerned with his own decree than his men's well-being.
And Jonathan breaks it accidentally, eats some honey, and Saul is ready to kill him for it.
His own son, over his own foolish oath. It takes the people stepping in to save Jonathan. It's just shocking leadership. Reveals that dangerous inflexibility in Saul, misplaced priorities. It really damages his moral authority.
Then comes the big one, the command regarding the Amalekites. Utter destruction, no exceptions.
A very direct, very specific command. A major test of Saul's obedience.
And he blows it. He spares King Agag, keeps the best livestock, basically substitutes his own judgment for God's clear instruction.
Partial obedience again. But in this case, it was disobedience. He thought he knew better.
And the consequences are final. God rejects Saul as king. Samuel confronts him.
Saul tries to justify it. Oh, we save the animals for sacrifice.
But Samuel cuts right through it with those famous words.
Hath the Lord as great delight in burnt offerings and sacrifices, as in obeying the voice of the Lord. Behold, to obey is better than sacrifice.
A foundational statement. True faith is about obedience, not just outward religious acts.
Precisely. Saul's selective obedience showed a lack of true submission.
The rejection is symbolized by the tearing of Samuel's robe, and Samuel himself finishes the job executing Agag. It's decisive.
The end of Saul's legitimate reign, and Samuel mourns for him deeply. There's tragedy there too.
But God tells Samuel, stop mourning, time to anoint a new king. Off to Bethlehem to the sons of Jesse.
Which brings us to David in chapter 16. Samuel's nervous, though. Saul is still powerful and potentially dangerous.
Understandably, God gives him the cover story. Just say you're going to offer a sacrifice.
Needs that wisdom and caution.
So Samuel gets to Bethlehem, starts looking over Jesse's sons. Impressive guys, the older ones.
But God keeps saying no, and gives Samuel that crucial lesson. The Lord sees not as man sees. Man looks on the outward appearance, but the Lord looks on the heart.
Such a key principle, a total shift from how Saul was likely perceived initially, based on his stature. It's about inner character now.
Exactly. So they finally call for the youngest, David, who's out watching the sheep.
Ruddy, handsome. And God says immediately, "Arise, anoint him, for this is he."
And the Spirit of the Lord comes upon David from that day on. It's a quiet anointing, but profound. God chooses the unexpected.
Meanwhile, as the Spirit comes on David, it departs from Saul.
And Saul is tormented by this evil spirit. His servants suggest music might help.
Which is how David ends up in Saul's court as a harp player.
And armor-bearer. The irony. The rejected king being served by the newly anointed one.
It's incredible. David brings Saul temporary relief with his music, a complex dynamic right from the start.
Definitely foreshadows what's to come.
Okay, chapter 17. The big one. David and Goliath.
The classic underdog story. Armies deadlocked, Goliath issuing challenges day after day.
And everyone, including Saul, is terrified, paralyzed by fear.
Goliath is this symbol of an overwhelming obstacle.
David shows up just bringing supplies for his brothers. He hears Goliath's insults.
And he's outraged. Who is this uncircumcised Philistine that he should defy the armies of the living God? His perspective is completely different.
It's about God's honor for him, not just the physical threat.
Exactly. His older brother Eliab gets angry. Saul is skeptical. He's just a kid.
But David stands his ground. He talks about fighting off lions and bears to protect his father's sheep.
He draws confidence from past faithfulness, trusting God's protection. Those small victories prepared him.
Saul offers his own armor, but David's like, nah, can't use this.
Right. He goes with what he knows. 5 smooth stones and his sling. Simple tools, but wielded with skill and faith.
It highlights that strength isn't always about the best gear, right? It's about resourcefulness, faith.
Absolutely. Innovation can beat brute force.
Goliath, of course, just laughs at him, scorns him.
But David's response is pure faith. You come at me with weapons, but I come at you in the name of the Lord of hosts.
He frames it as a spiritual battle.
And then, 1 stone.
1 stone from the sling, Goliath goes down. David uses Goliath's own sword to finish the job.
An iconic victory. Faith over fear, courage against all odds. It resonates even today.
But Saul's reaction right after is strange. He asks Abner, whose son is this youth?
Yeah, it's like he barely registered David before, even though David played the harp for him. Shows Saul's self-absorption, maybe? His growing insecurity.
It definitely marks the start of his jealousy.
Chapters 18 to 20 really track that escalating jealousy and persecution.
But amidst that darkness, you have the incredible friendship between Jonathan and David.
Such a contrast. Jonathan, the heir, recognizes David's calling and puts friendship and loyalty above his own ambition. It's remarkable.
What really triggers Saul's intense jealousy is that song the women sing.
Ah, yes. Saul hath slain his thousands, and David his 10,000s.
That praise just lights a fire under Saul's insecurity. He starts eyeing David, the text says, with malice.
Jealousy twists everything. He sees David only as a rival now.
And he starts actively trying to kill him, throwing spears.
Twice, while David is playing the harp for him.
Then he tries manipulation, offering his daughters in marriage, hoping David gets killed, fighting the Philistines to earn the bride price.
It's desperate and paranoid, using his own family as pawns.
But his daughter Michal actually loves David and helps him escape.
Right. And then there are those weird episodes where Saul's messengers and even Saul himself get overcome by the Spirit and start prophesying when they go to capture David.
What do you make of that?
It's strange. Maybe God's sovereignty being asserted, a temporary restraint on Saul. It definitely shows God's power is still at play, even amidst Saul's rebellion.
David is desperate, obviously. He goes to Jonathan. Why does your father want me dead?
And Jonathan is steadfast. Their secret meetings, the plan with the arrows to figure out Saul's true intentions. It shows deep trust.
Jonathan risks everything for David.
He truly does. He knows David is the chosen one.
And when Jonathan defends David, Saul explodes, even threatens his own son.
Shows the depth of Saul's obsession.
That farewell between David and Jonathan is just heartbreaking, reaffirming their covenant as David has to flee.
A profound loss for both. Solidifies their bond even as their paths diverge dramatically.
So David is on the run, chapters 21 through 25, constant danger.
He goes to Ahimelech the priest at Nob, gets help under false pretenses, claims he's on a secret mission for Saul.
Gets the holy bread, gets Goliath's sword, symbolic, carrying that past victory.
But it's deceptive and has terrible consequences.
Because Doeg the Edomite sees him.
Saul's herdsman. He rats David out.
Leading Saul to massacre Ahimelech and all the priests at Nob. Just brutal.
Shows Saul's ruthlessness. And David carries the guilt of that, the unintended ripple effect of his deception.
David then flees to Gath, Philistine territory. But he's recognized.
So he has to pretend to be insane to escape. Feigning madness, it's a real low point, shows his vulnerability.
He starts gathering followers, though, the indebted, the discontented, those in distress.
A real band of outsiders. But they become loyal to him. Shows his leadership emerging even in exile.
He protects Keilah from Philistines but can't stay. Saul's always after him. He's constantly asking God for guidance, though.
Yes, using the ephod. That reliance on God distinguishes him sharply from Saul's impulsiveness.
He finds refuge in Ziph, where Jonathan finds him secretly.
Another crucial moment of encouragement. Jonathan reaffirms the covenant, tells David, "You will be king and I'll be second." Gives him hope.
But the Ziphites betrayed David to Saul twice.
Shows the constant danger, shifting loyalties. Saul nearly catches him once, but a Philistine invasion pulls Saul away.
Seems like divine intervention again.
It really does.
Then the famous incident in the cave at En-Gedi, David has the perfect chance to kill Saul while he's indisposed.
Right. But he refuses. "I will not stretch forth mine hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed." Cuts off just the corner of Saul's robe instead.
It's a defining moment. Respect for God's appointment, even when the person is failing. He trusts God's timing, won't take vengeance himself.
Then he confronts Saul from a distance, shows him the robe piece.
And Saul has another moment of remorse, acknowledges David's righteousness, but it doesn't last.
No. These moments are temporary. Saul's insecurity runs too deep.
Then the text notes Samuel dies. A major figure gone.
Big loss for Israel. And right after that, we get the story of Nabal and Abigail.
Ah, Nabal. Wealthy, but foolish and churlish. David's men protected his shepherds.
Provided security. But when David asks for provisions for his hungry men, Nabal just insults them. Totally ungrateful.
David is furious, ready to wipe out Nabal's entire household.
But Abigail, Nabal's wife, steps in. She's described as intelligent and beautiful.
And incredibly wise and diplomatic. She gathers provisions, meets David, apologizes for her husband's foolishness, and persuades David not to shed blood.
Her intervention is brilliant. She prevents violence, recognizes David's future importance. David is deeply impressed, thanks God for sending her.
Nabal dies shortly after divine judgment, perhaps, and David marries Abigail.
A very shrewd move, politically and personally. Abigail is clearly a major asset.
Okay, chapter 26. Deja vu. The Ziphites betrayed David again.
Here we go again. Saul comes hunting David with 3,000 men. Still obsessed.
David sneaks into Saul's camp again, at night, with Abishai.
Abishai's ready to kill Saul this time. God has delivered him into your hand.
But David refuses. Again, same reason. Respect for the Lord's anointed. This time he just takes Saul's spear and water jug.
Incredible restraint. Reinforces his character, his patience, his trust in God's plan.
He confronts Saul and Abner from across the valley again. Shows them the spear and jug.
And Saul has another moment of confession. "I've sinned. I will no more do thee harm."
But David doesn't seem to buy it this time. It's the same cycle.
Right. Saul blesses him, but they go their separate ways. The pattern of pursuit and temporary remorse is just too entrenched.
So, chapter 27, David seems to finally decide, this isn't going to stop. He seeks refuge in Philistine territory with King Achish of Gath.
A strategic move. He probably figures Saul won't pursue him into enemy land. It's pragmatic, born of desperation perhaps.
Achish gives him the city of Ziklag, and David lives there among the Philistines.
But plays a dangerous game. He raids other groups.
But tells Achish he's raiding Judahite areas, deceiving his host to gain trust.
It's morally complex, survival tactics in a very tight spot. But it works. Achish trusts him.
So much so that Achish believes David now hates Israel and will serve him forever.
Which leads to a very awkward situation when the Philistines prepare for a big war against Israel.
Achish expects David and his men to fight alongside them, against his own people.
David's response is very ambiguous. He's caught.
But the other Philistine lords are deeply suspicious. Isn't this the David they sang about who killed our people?
They don't trust him an inch. They remember Goliath, the 10,000 song. They demand Achish send him away.
Achish, despite his personal trust in David, has to listen to his commanders. Politics.
So he sends David back to Ziklag, tells him, "You're good, but the lords don't approve." David pretends to be disappointed.
Phew. A close call averted for David. Avoids having to fight Israel or betray the Philistines.
But then, chapter 30, disaster strikes Ziklag while they're gone.
The Amalekites raid the city, burn it, take all the women and children captive, including David's own wives.
Devastating. They return to find nothing. Just ruins and smoke. Their family's gone.
The grief is overwhelming. David's men are so distraught they talk of stoning him.
A real crisis point. His leadership is on the line.
But David encouraged himself in the Lord his God. Crucial moment. He seeks God's guidance through Abiathar.
Asks, should I pursue? Will I overtake them? God says, pursue, for thou shalt surely overtake them, and without fail recover all.
That divine assurance is key. He leads his men even though some are too exhausted to cross the brook Besor.
They find an Egyptian servant left behind by the Amalekites. He guides them.
They launch a surprise attack, defeat the Amalekites completely, and recover everyone and everything.
A total reversal, from despair to complete victory. Shows David's resilience, his leadership under pressure.
And he establishes that fair principle. The spoil is shared equally between those who fought and those who guarded the supplies.
Good leadership, fairness, valuing everyone's contribution, contrasts nicely with Saul's self-serving moments.
Which brings us finally to chapter 31, the tragic end for Saul.
The battle at Mount Gilboa against the Philistines. It goes badly for Israel.
Utter defeat. Saul's sons are killed, including Jonathan.
Such a loss. Jonathan, David's loyal friend.
Saul himself is badly wounded by archers. He doesn't want to be captured and tortured or humiliated by the Philistines.
So he asks his armor-bearer to kill him. The armor-bearer refuses.
So Saul falls on his own sword, dies by suicide. His armor-bearer follows suit. A grim end.
A final act of desperation and fear. So different from David's consistent refusal to harm him.
The Philistines find the bodies, desecrate Saul's corpse, display it as a trophy, the ultimate humiliation.
Symbolizes the totality of their victory and Israel's defeat, the cost of disobedience.
But there's a final act of loyalty, the men of Jabesh Gilead.
Right. Remember, Saul delivered them way back at the beginning of his reign.
They undertake a risky night mission, retrieve the bodies of Saul and his sons from the wall of Beth-shan.
They burn them, bury the bones respectfully, an act of courage and gratitude, honoring their fallen king despite his flaws.
So wrapping up this deep dive into 1 Samuel, what a journey. Samuel, Saul, David, their lives all tangled together.
Yeah, we've seen themes of obedience, disobedience, leadership, divine choice, human consequences. It's all there.
So many aha moments, right? Hannah's prayer, Samuel's calling, the ark's wild ride.
The demand for a king, Saul's tragic flaws, David's rise against all odds.
For you, the learner, grasping these stories really does provide context for so much that follows, historically and religiously.
And they offer insights into timeless human struggles. Power, faith, identity, leadership.
Which leads to maybe a final thought for you to mull over. Think about that tension we saw throughout between divine will and human choice. How did you see that playing out?
Yeah, God has plans, but people make choices, often different ones. How do those dynamics still resonate today in leadership in our own lives?
And what does it really mean when the text talks about finding a leader after God's own heart? What does that look like based on what we've seen?
Something definitely worth pondering.